Looking at the stars and with everything going on, Michael, are we doomed?
We might be doomed in the world of what we've done to the earth. I will tell you that I am bona fide frightened about what's going to go on over the next 5 years when I look at the political landscape and then I add the astrology. When I add the astrology, what I see that in 2025, when the planet Neptune, who's now in Pisces, and so when Neptune moves into Aries in 2025, that's the sign of the planet of war. That's Mars's sign. I've been in a personal process of letting myself tell the truth as I see it, even though it scares me to do so.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wondered what in the world is coming for the second half of 2023 and if we'll be all right, then do we have the Predictions Daily Astro Alert show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Michael Lennox, my all-time favorite astrologer and creator of the Daily Astro Alert, about all things second half of 2023 and what it means for you. So welcome back to the show, Michael. Are you ready to shine?
I am. You know I'm ready to shine, Michael. I like shining with you better than almost anything.
Awesome. And we got baby energy or Hana Bear energy, and you're just radiating it right back. I can see it, Michael.
Yeah.
So it almost makes it difficult to ask the first question, but I'm going to go for it anyway. Before we dive right into things, I've asked this question before, Michael, and I get to ask it again, looking at the stars and with everything going on, Michael. Are we doomed?
Well, let me say this about that, Michael. I have always thought of myself as the voice of hope, the voice of reason. I have great sense of optimism, and I believe in the power of resilience. And I have always been, as a public sort of displayer of my particular wisdom, somebody who was very committed in keeping hope alive and spinning things in the most positive way possible. And I think that there are people out there in social media who would agree, who would sort of describe me somehow as like the more positive. I'm not a fear mongerer. I don't. Yeah, baby. I'm not out there talking about all of the current events and difficult things out there and lining up the astrology. And trust me, if I were doing that, I think I'd be more popular if I dipped into the fear pool, which I don't. So I have a lot invested in being the hopeful guy who doesn't capitulate to fear. However,
oh no.
And Michael, you have been part of this experience for me because it's been a couple of years now that you and I have known each other, and you've had me on many times in your community to talk about astrology at a time when the world was clearly starting to heat up, break down, and fall apart and change at levels we had not ever seen before. So I've been, I don't want to say struggling with, because I don't like that word, but I've definitely been in a personal process of letting myself tell the truth as I see it, even though it scares me to do so. So are we doomed? I don't think doomed is, unless you want to talk about climate crisis, and then we could say, are we doomed? We might be doomed in the world of what we've done to the earth. I will tell you that I am bona fide frightened about what's going to go on in the United States of America over the next 5 years when I look at the political landscape and then I add the astrology. When I add the astrology, what I see is violence in the United States like we've not seen before. And we've already seen a level of accelerated violence that is almost untenable. And I'm telling you that in 2025, when the planet Neptune, who's now in Pisces, a kind of sort of watery, stillness, preparatory mansion, This is the planet that rules religiosity as much as our spiritual connection. Like in our world, Neptune is the great spirit planet where we connect to our spiritual nature. But trust me, fundamentalist Christians are still under the influence of astrology, and Neptune is their planet as well. And so when Neptune moves into Aries in 2025, that's the sign of the planet of war. That's Mars's sign. So the planet that drives people's religious and spiritual connection will move out of a territory where he's been since 2011 that's naturally preparatory. Pisces is where we're just in formless possibility, and we come into form in Aries. That's, in fact, Pisces to Aries is considered the birth canal of the zodiac. The last sign before the first sign, Pisces, the unconscious and the void. And then there's an energy that rises up in that void that says, I'll go. And that's the cardinal fire sign of Aries, the startup energy that will dive in. So when Neptune moves into the sign of action, anger, war, in a year after an election in the United States that is already turning out to be playing out at a level that we don't even have words to describe. Like this is such a new landscape that no matter what happens in November of 24, I'm frightened about what 25 and 26 are going to bring when there are other planetary ingresses that I haven't even mentioned yet that I think will be reflected by things on the planet that are accelerated above and beyond what we're seeing now in terms of violence in the streets.
Thank you. I like to bring it to the positive, so I want to dive into everything over the next few years, but I have to ask, because I do see that we get a decision to make as humanity, whether we're going to keep driving off the cliff or whether we're going to make it, and everything I'm hearing is we are going to make it. It's just, are we going to have it the easy way or the hard way?
Right. So let me give you the other side of the story of the same transit.
Yes.
So you've got lots of people on the planet who are orienting themselves in a spiritual sensibility, who are perhaps not ready to be activated. Activated meaning a term to be like ready to be an activist, right? So I'm sort of been that. The idea of being an activist out there is like, no, thank you. That is not natural to me. It's not in my bones to do so. I'm much too much about keeping peace and harmony. I got a Libra moon and Libra Mars, man. I want peace, right? So, and my mother was also like an angry, activated feminist, right? So like I watched her screaming in the streets, at the strike or the, like we went to the school strike board meeting when I was 8 years old, right, at night. My mother was my mother. So I have this like aversion to that. But I'm feeling activatable at this time because how can I see what's going on and not want to play a role? All of us who are potentially activatable through our strong beliefs, we will get fired up when Neptune moves into Aries. Aries invites movement, action. And so when the world shifts and changes in whatever way that it does when Neptune moves into Aries, there will be also a tremendous rising up of hopeful, activated, right-thinking folk who are ready to bring in a new chapter. But I don't think that's going to be met with ease and grace. I think it's going to be met with tremendous, tremendous resistance. And so I speak into the violent piece because I think we're going to see it. And we're going to all have to find our activation while in that kind of an aggressive landscape.
Thank you. So, and I'm going to give my 2 cents on this, which is, first, I'm an angel numbers guy. And I see the number 222 and 2222222 ad nauseum coming up for people, which to me means discernment. We get to make decisions and we get to step forward. But we get to step forward, not against anything. Doesn't work. Creates more of the same. We get to step forward, arm in arm, hand in hand for something. This is the Gandhi statement of be the change you wish to see in the world. For peace, for love, for the earth, for a new world. It's not the time to go to the streets and pull out the activist sign and start beating it over anyone. Unless you want to beat them with love.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. There's, I know who I am and I know who I'm going to be, as we face, more difficult times if they're coming. And there are millions of people who are ready to be activated in a way that brings more love, more peace, more possibility for bringing the polarized sides together. But we have to make that happen, and that happens through experience.
Yeah, and that's where this show, and then let's dive into more astrology here. I've been pivoting, Michael, and my pivoting has been from a real warm and fuzzy just place of love, which is a great place. But I'm realizing that people are hitting the spiritual bypass by going, oh, it's just warm and fuzzy and love. Folks, we got work to do.
This is why I'm sort of in this weird place of I've never been the guy who will say things about how difficult it's going to be, but I don't want to be bypassing, and I want to make sure that when we get there, that those of us who are ready to sort of step up into creating a world where peace for humanity is possible, that we are ready to do our part, whatever that winds up looking like.
Thank you. And so we're kind of priming people today, grooming people today, or it's a peace boot camp 101, and which is a very strange term. We're not talking war for peace here, folks. That doesn't exist. However, what I'm seeing, going big picture here, if I lay it on the line, this is now a show. I have 3 words: freedom, passion, spirit. We ain't free, Michael. We are taught to think certain ways. We are taught to say certain things. We are taught to buy certain things, to do certain things, to not do other things. And people think we're free. We ain't free. I'm here, you're here to free people.
Yes.
Job number 1.
Yes.
And then we have to do this connecting with the heart. That's the passion and spirit. It can't be, well, I'm free. I'm just a human. You ain't just a human. In fact, you can call it a simulation. You call it an earth school, but you're far from just human. And we got to wake everybody up to that.
We got to wake everybody up. That's what's possible with Neptune in Aries. More waking up.
Yeah. So let's dive into that. and let's talk about love, baby. Let's talk about Venus.
You want to talk about Venus?
And retrograde. And where we are now.
Well, where we are right now is Venus is now backward moving, right? So she let me get my dates up here. So every personal planet retrograde has 3 distinct acts. The first one, we call this the retrograde shadow, right? The planet isn't retrograde yet, but in this case, Venus shadowing the stuff that she's going to visit when she turns around and goes backwards. So those dates were June 18th to July 23rd. So I call this the brochure. Right?
I don't think we want the brochure anymore.
It's like the retrograde is like a retreat you're going to go on. It's a process that you've signed up for. And so you read the brochure between June 18th and July 23rd so that you know everything that's going to happen in the process. So you can look back from the middle of June and the first 3 weeks of July for issues that came up around love, relationship, intimacy, regulating your emotions, your relationship to finances, because Venus is also a finance planet. And anything that came up that was difficult, challenging, or might have presented you with something to work on is likely to come up while Venus is backwards, which is now. Like while we're talking, she turned around. In fact, she started moving again. Like she stayed at like 28 degrees of Leo for like 11 days. And it was just about a week ago that she started moving again. So we're like smack dab in the middle of the retrograde process. So now we're in the territory where things are going to come up that absolutely require our attention. The stuff in that first part might not have needed your attention. It's just signaling that we're going to be back in the trenches during the time between July 23rd and September 3rd, which is the end of her retrograde.
So I'll get real personal here. Jessica and I have been healing a lot of wounds together. And we could see that during this time period or during this brochure. What you're saying is those wounds will likely pop back up at an even higher level, not because something's wrong, I'll put that in quotes, but because it really gets to get healed at a deep level.
Absolutely. If it comes up again, it's just because it needs your attention. I would even also say there was something you implied with your words that I'm not entirely sure is accurate, that it has to be bigger or harder.
Okay, well, thank you.
It might just be again.
Okay,
like it might just be again, right? You didn't fix it last time. We gotta go under the hood again. It's funny. You and Jessica are actually having this happen.
So for those who are listening, you're looking at our charts right now, going,
yes,
interesting.
I'm looking at your charts, right? And I'm seeing that, we'll start with you. One of the interesting things about your chart is that your Mars is in Leo, so that your body and your decision-making, how you relate to your anger, goals, projects, sex, is in Leo. So and it's in your 10th house of work and career. So that's why you're an entrepreneur in your own business. That's why you're, public in your expression, because you've got a lot of 10th house. I do too. That's one of the reasons why we sort of vibe similarly. But it does mean for you that you are in a place where matters of the heart are very directly connected to how you're embodying your life. Right. So, in some ways I don't know if that's harder. It's just more direct for you. Like if I were sitting and meeting you in a session, preparing you for Venus retrograde, I'd be like, dude, how you walk through your life in a loving state is what this is going to be about. Primarily. You have the benefit of the way that Venus is interacting with your chart as you go is pretty lovely and solid. You're not having a rough time of it. In fact, your Venus and where Venus is, harmonizing in some beautiful sextile energy. So 60 degrees is lovely geometry. It's touching your moon in a lovely way as well. Where you're in an interesting place, especially for the last week or so, and just hint, breaking the fourth wall, we recorded this a week before it launched. So I guess I'm talking about 2 weeks ago from when this launches. Yeah. Venus stood still.
Which is when this launches is, let's be honest, people know, they follow the show. That's exactly when Rue transitioned.
Ah, that's right. Well, the whole time that Venus wasn't moving, which is when Rue transitioned, Venus was squaring your Neptune in the second house. Second house is about what I desire, what I value, what I love, like my beloved rooster. And with a square to your Neptune, it's like a fog machine of confusion, right? So you had this great loss that you didn't expect to have after maybe finally coming to a place where you had managed to get through the difficulty of the last couple of years and just creating a family. And Rue was part of your family. So for 11 days, Venus was squaring your Neptune, and that's not a comfortable transit in and of itself. And if Venus were moving normally, that would be a Tuesday. But it wound up being a 2-week fog machine where I guess you were moving through love stuff and coming into more awareness of how deeply you love. And well, you tell me, what were you thinking about love while Rue transitioned?
Well, to an extreme, and I say that as I'm watching lightning bolts outside the window as there's this storm kind of marching toward the house, and I'm going, because there's no coincidences. Isn't this interesting, Michael? I'm doing well, and I'm sure there is. I can't even begin to know where I'm at in the healing and grief. I don't even pretend to have a clue.
By the way, Michael, that's Venus squaring Neptune. I don't have a clue. Neptune in shadow is the trigger of Neptune's shadow is always cloudiness, confusion. I don't know.
That makes sense. And I was going back. Well, he passed after climbing up the stairs. And I call it his stairway to heaven. I think he kept going, and his physical form was done. And I go to the stairs, and I see it again, and I see it again, and I see it again. And your mind questions, well, could I have done anything? Blah, 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 blah. And it goes on all these different questions. And then I go to did I love him enough? And because I don't remember what happened when he was passing in my arms, but he had probably already transitioned. He was probably gone when he was in my arms. Did I tell him you're okay? Did I tell him I love you? What did I tell him then? So it's all these questions about love that have come up. And even Jessica would say, did I show him enough love? I was trying to take care of the baby. Did I show him enough love? Did I give him enough love? Was there enough love to go around? It's all these love questions.
Yep. Perfect. And love questions through the lens of not being clear and needing to answer those questions for yourself. And so your process through the rest of the Venus retrograde cycle will answer some of those questions in a way that I think is more than just about Rue, but about you and how you give and receive love as a human being in a body.
Well, I don't want to stay on me. I want the show to be about everyone. However, when I've been asking myself, okay, what are you doing? Where are you steering the show? How are things going? And I'm like, what's interesting or unique about our show is we're going to dive deep into the fear and bring it to love, fear and bring it to light. But there's an element of love that is our show. And that's special about this. And that's why I love having you on, Michael, because you get this. We riff on this together.
Yes, I feel the same way. So Jessica has something really interesting for me when I look at this. Number one, it's going to feature a wounding for her.
And there goes the lightning and the thunder.
Yeah. In Jessica's chart, her sun and her Chiron oppose each other. So that conscious awareness and wound sort of in a dynamic tension. And it's actually, I love to talk to her about her chart one day because she's a transmuter of wound. I don't know if you see her as that. I do.
Tell me more just for a second. So everybody knows her from behind the scenes, but what does that mean?
Chiron, the wounded healer, is in her 8th house of change and transformation, death and rebirth. Any planet in anybody's 8th house is going to reflect the ability to transform deeply, to die and be reborn to whatever the consciousness is of that planet. So being Chiron, the wounded healer, in the 8th house, then she's got a natural and organic ability to transmute wound. Her as the mother in the dynamic that you guys shared the last bunch of years, when I look at the chart, I go, oh, well, that's how she was able to do that and thrive through what would have been a more devastating wound than you or I would know as men.
And you're talking for everyone. We'll just go there. 3 miscarriages and then lost Hannah Bear's twin in utero.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And she's designed to transmute stuff at that level. That's my assessment here. And in her chart, that opposition between her sun and her Chiron is part of a grand cross with her nodal path, her destiny, her past and her future. So there's this what's called a fixed grand cross in her chart that when it's activated, then major change is happening in her life. And so her north node, her dharma and her destiny is in the sign of Leo, one of the places where Venus traveled over. So for Jessica, there are things that are occurring in this Venus retrograde that are absolutely pushing her forward in her sense of purpose and North Star movement. But Venus squared her Uranus, which is a sudden and unexpected event. It squares her sun and her Chiron, so a wound and a kind of identity sort of crisis. But like you, Venus, where she's doing all her retrograding, is touching her natal Venus very well. So it's not like either of you are out of the room of love. You're actually fully in the love while facing the challenges, because both of you are experiencing Venus sextiling your natal Venuses. So that means your heart, as reflected by your chart and where Venus is now for both of you, is operating productively and beautifully. Venus is trining her moon, her Neptune, and her Mars. Moon is her unconscious. Neptune is her spiritual connection. Mars is her embodiment. Both of your Marses are being touched by Venus in positive ways. So you're being changed in how you embody by virtue of how you move through this whole process, which is being led by, certainly the beginning of it is being led by this experience of loss and grief, which you guys don't, not only do you guys know a lot about loss and grief, you know a lot about how to be in loss and grief as a couple. And this is just one other iteration of that.
And we're okay if we don't have another iteration for quite a long time now.
I think you guys are due for your uniterations.
And we'll dial back to a few more questions on that. I want to go with a collective here. There has been some interesting energies going on. And one of them, and I'm wondering how it's playing out in the stars, is it feels like overall 2023 is a collective energy of chaos.
Well, yes. So you want to know, is there an astrological corollary
absolutely.
to that? Yes, there is. All right. So let's start with the idea of what does the collective mean through the lens of astrology? So we know the collective to mean a way in which everybody on the planet is experiencing something at the same time and in the same way. That's the collective. In astrology, that is the nodes of the moon. The nodes of the moon, where there's a south node and a north node, these are vectors of energy that shoot out from the orbit of the moon around the Earth, where it crosses paths with the orbit of the Earth around the sun, right? So you got this big circle of the Earth's orbit and this little circle that sits on top of the big circle of the moon's orbit. Everybody can picture that, right? Picture, unless you're driving. Don't do this if you're driving. Picture a big circle and a little circle on top of it. And then imagine a shooting out of energy in the direction of the forward sensibility and an opposite in behind us. And those are the nodes of the moon. The forward one is the north node. The back one is the south node. And if you know anything about physics, if there are any quantum physicists out there, nodes are a function of movement of bodies, right? They're not an imaginary point just because we're talking about astrology. These nodes are measurable. They're mathematic in nature. And when the sun and the earth and the nodes are in an alignment, we have an eclipse. And then 6 months later, the sun will align with the other node and we have an eclipse.
October.
Yes, October is our next eclipse season. So why this is important, why I have to do all of this to explain the nodes, is to introduce the audience to the connection between the nodes and eclipses, because eclipses are radically transformative. They're powerful. They're fated. They move us forward. In the old days, in the ancient days, they were portents of events to come. Usually bad ones. And I like to joke, it's like bad shit happens all the time. And back 500 years, we just didn't know about it. So eclipses are also a collective experience. The whole Earth, Moon, Sun consciousness experiences the breaking of the beam of light. So then what that does for us as astrologers is allow us to look at the nodes of the moon and make some determinations about energetic transits that are happening where planets make contact with the nodes and how that reflects changes on the planet in the collective that you can see by simply turning on the news. Let's go to Pluto.
Yes. Oh,
so
boy.
I'll hearken you all back.
No. Can I say no?
Yeah, well, you can, but then we'd be out of the authentic room where we're trying to bring love to the difficult places, and the difficult places are owned by Pluto. So Pluto is the great transformer. When he moves through territory, things are breaking down and being rebuilt. They're being killed and reborn. It's important to say this because, if I say death and, you guys have to understand, there's always a rebirth when we speak of a death with Pluto, right?
We hear, just as a brief aside from animal communicators and in my automatic writing, but particularly animal communicators, I have, in theory, but I believe it, Rue on the other side, he says he's in negotiations to see how fast he can get back down here. And you can picture that with Rue.
Oh, totally. No, totally. It's jizzy. So to give an example that people will recognize about how the collective is even impacted by Pluto's movement, because Pluto is a generational planet. He spends about 20 years in a sign. So in fact, astrologers will look at where Pluto was and call them generations, right? The generation of Pluto in whatever, planet he was in the 20 years in which you were born. So Pluto in that way has a collective power because his movements mark our generational changes. So back in 2007 and 8 was when he was backtracking between Sagittarius, where he had been for the 20 years prior, into Capricorn, the sign that rules structure, like banking and housing and markets and the way we structure our world. And that was exactly the moment that the recession began and the housing market broke down. And that was a signal. We astrologers knew this was coming before it happened. But I'm sharing it with your audience because now we're going to talk about the now. Because now we're 20 years later. Pluto has been backtracking between the end of Capricorn and into Aquarius and back again and in and back. He'll do that for 2 years, just like he did in 7 and 8. He's doing that in 23 and 24. This you can see in the collective with AI. That's the perfect exemplar of the planet Pluto moving into the sign of Aquarius, which invented the internet, the global new world that is all joined, the noosphere up there in where satellites circumnavigate the planet and we can get to all of it right here. That's Aquarius. In fact, the internet is the age of Aquarius, for better or for worse. So it's interesting that when Pluto moving in and out of Capricorn into Aquarius, that suddenly we're in this AI explosion that seems to be both positive, expansive, and beautiful and wonderful and terrifying and overwhelming at the same time. And that's Pluto's W. That's Pluto. He's also in Capricorn, because he's in Capricorn right now. He moved in and out earlier this year, and next year he'll zippity-doo between the two again, and then he'll be permanently in Aquarius at the end of 24. But right now, he's at the 30th degree of Capricorn. The last degree of any sign has a mastery to it. It's called the anaretic degree. It basically means that the final degree of any sign contains the wisdom of all of the 29 degrees that precede it. So it's not like cuspy where it's thinking about where it's going next. It's like turned around going, have I mastered everything about this mansion? So Pluto at the 30th degree of Capricorn all year this year and all year next year is holding a sense of change and transformation at a masterful level, doing the destroying of the old structure to create the new one. Like, everybody's terrified that AI is gonna eradicate things from the past, and you know what? It is. It's gonna kill some structures and build new ones that are magnificent and mind-blowing. And I'm telling you, the next 20 years are gonna bring tech advantages that are gonna make your, toes curl. So all of this has been a setup to tell you that right now, July of 2023, the nodes of the moon just changed signs, where the north node has moved into Aries. The nodes move backwards. So the north node is at the mastery final degree of Aries. The south node has moved backwards into Libra, where the south node is at the mastery final degree of Libra. And that sets up a T-square between Pluto and the nodes. And when the sun was in Cancer at the end of July, the sun created a big square opposing Pluto and squaring the nodes. And if you were turning on the news that week, that's when things were heating the shit up about indictments and craziness in Congress, more so than ever. And the month of July was insane. So this transit signals a collective shift out of the old world into the new, out of the age of Pisces, fully into the age of Aquarius, out of a world where we built a country here in America on an experiment, and we're on the precipice of seeing how are we going to survive what's changing now. And this is the tipping point, and this astrological square is the reflection of that. And it's making this summer crazy and chaotic in a very big way. It's making this year and next year crazy and chaotic and showing some change. And for my money, it's the peak. Well, it's a peak for me because this is my lifetime, right? In my lifetime, this is the peak of the old world is gone. We are creating a new world as we go. And that's why it is so important for us to find the love, keep the resilience going, and muster the activation needed to create a new world where all are cared for and peace for humanity is possible at long last.
Thank you. Brings up a few more collective questions that I think are important. Recently, we've had on Dr. Stephen Greer on the Disclosure Project, UFOs, UAPs, what's really going on. We had on Greg Braden on our hidden past and hidden history and where we came from, and also touching on that. And when you're talking about technological advances, I think your exact word were in the next 20 or 30 years, technological advances that will make your toes curl. I love how you put that, toes curl. It demands that we come to terms with technology that's already here, that we're not allowed, I don't know how else to put it, whoever they is not allowing us to see. It's being hidden under the carpet. It's being kept from us for fossil fuels, for whatever you want to call it, for the current power structure. Is there something in the stars that says now is the time, or the time is coming for the truth? I know this is coming up with 1776 and where we are as a country, but is this a time where the truth is finally going to come out? Yoda. Or Obi-Wan.
Well, it's a beautiful question. The short answer to the question is, I'd say yes. I think that's, part of what this whole collective crazy, move from the past to the future. I mean, look, it's already started to happen. We've just had a congressional, something where they're talking about UFOs, and it's clear that there's stuff that we're not being told.
But they're also trying to bring it to fear. And they're also trying to say it. That's why we need to weaponize blah, 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 which to me is a method of control. Fear is control.
So I agree wholeheartedly. Like the powers that be and the man and the patriarchy and the structures of government that are built in colonial
stuff.
stuff. Yes, they will. Well, that's what listen, that's what the media is designed to do. Even the liberal media is designed to keep us afraid. And so the heavy sigh was like just sort of me like, all right, Uranus is moving into Gemini next year as well. So there's two big planetary, well, three, if you include Pluto in this. You've got three outer planets. In fact, you've got the three outer planets. Like, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. There are the three outer planets. The outer planets reflect the collective. The outer planets, for us as individual, reflect our higher selves who hold our soul's journey in its wake. But for the planet, it's the collective. So Pluto changes signs and goes into an air sign, Aquarius, which is all about new ideas, innovation, and expansion and sudden. Right? It's Uranus's sign. So if the powers that be have some control to keep things secret, Capricorn would be a great sign to keep the status quo, the structures in place that keep information from the people. Does that make sense? Are you getting where I'm going? Right, because it's all about structure. It's Saturn's sign. It's all what we build, and what we have built is, a government that lies to its people. We'll just keep it simple like that. So Pluto moving into Aquarius alone, that ingress alone features the community, because Aquarius invented the community, has an innovative, sudden possibility energy, because Aquarius is the sign ruled by Uranus. The great awakener, we call Uranus, the lightning flash that anything can happen and probably will. Okay. Uranus in 2025, along with Neptune moving into Aries, Uranus is going to change signs. And Uranus is going to move into Gemini. Gemini invented words. So when you've got a planet capable of knocking shit down fast in the sign of words, that is a decade or so of the possibility of information being shared that changes things radically and suddenly. And remember where Pluto is. Pluto's in Aquarius, Uranus's sign. So Pluto, being in the sign ruled by Uranus, is getting what's called some disposition from Uranus. Disposition is sort of like we would use it. What's your disposition today? Well, I'm mad, stay away. Your mood. So if Pluto, the planet of change, transformation, death, and rebirth, is getting some dispositional support from the planet that reflects the sudden and the unexpected and the anything can happen and probably will, then Pluto himself is ready to give up the ghost a little bit for revealing information. And then what happens when Uranus moves into Gemini, Uranus and Pluto will hold a trine for a year or so. That means that they're going to be harmonizing well with each other. It means that 25 and 26 are absolutely years where there might be exactly what you're talking about in and amongst all of the other chaos that we move through in those years, might also include more information being made readily available or secrets revealed. That's another thing. You ask about when things might be revealed. Secrets is a Neptune consciousness. Neptune in Pisces, his ruling sign, is really good at keeping secrets, and he's been there since 2011. With Neptune moving into Aries, then there's going to be an impulse to bust open secrets. So between all of those ingresses of Pluto moving into Aquarius, Neptune moving into Aries, and Uranus moving into Gemini, I think you have the possibility of information being revealed in sudden fashion over those couple of years.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And this brings up one more collect. So I'm going to take that as a positive. We can view it anyway, but I'm going to take that as a huge positive. One more piece for the collective. Then I want to go into some other things taking place during this year and beyond, which is, and this may be Uranus. It seems like not only is there chaos, not only is there everything going on, and we've got to address Mother Earth here in a minute, but it seems like we are in, for no other way to describe it, an accelerator. It seems like a minute, an hour, a day, a year, all take less time than they used to. Is there a reason for it? And is there going to be a respite where time doesn't seem to be accelerating so fast right now? Like, can we breathe?
I think, Michael, that I have to defer the causality of the acceleration as not within the domain of astrology. I think when I think about things like this, that there's evidence, first of all, the universe is accelerating. So if galaxies are speeding away from each other at a rate that's accelerating, then time is accelerating. There's evidence, like I'm not a science geek enough to be like involved in this, but I think there's evidence that there are like frequency speed ups happening in measurable atomic time or something. I'm speaking way out of my knowledge base here.
She'll know about it shortly.
That's right, baby. You've got a lot to teach us. The reason I'm sort of deferring out or pushing away this question as astrology related is, though the solar system is not a clock, it's not gears that are symmetrical and moving in symmetry and precision. If we had made it like a clock, it's dynamic and it has movement. It doesn't accelerate. So like even Uranus, which would be a natural planet to go, if there's acceleration being felt, maybe it's a Uranus thing. Uranus is in Taurus, the slowest moving sign there is. So if anything, sudden and unexpected events are actually occurring in a minuscule, like slower way. So we're probably better at pivoting because the planet that brings the sudden is in a sign where it's moving very slowly. But truly, it's like when people say, do you think we're going to blow up the world? I say, no, I don't think that's our end. Why? Because I'm an astrologer. And because of that, I think of the movement of energy in the way that astrology describes. And this tension that we experience that makes people say, oh my God, I think it's all going to fall apart. That tension is constant. Every generation since the Industrial Revolution has believed the world was going to end because it was accelerating. Now, that seems silly to us, but when the train was invented, people were terrified that the world was moving too fast and was going to end. So I would say that ain't going to happen because astrology reflects a continuous tension of opposites that never abates. The tension doesn't ever explode. It just turns and turns and turns and turns forever and ever and ever until the universe ends. So from that respect, astrology isn't reflecting acceleration. I think atoms and molecules are, and the pace of how we express and experience life has. The 24-hour news cycle and the invention of the smartphone has made everything seem like it has to be tiny, fast, and in little bits. But it ain't astrology.
Very good. So on that note, something you brought up earlier, and this show is global. However, you and I are speaking from the U.S. We've talked about this before, but you're talking about the locomotive, since you're talking about trains, that is coming down the track. And I do see this, I'm going to be very positive, in the long run as being a healing experience. What is going on right now? And is this some sort of U.S. shadow work that we're going through?
We have talked about this before, and it is germane that the challenges that we have now are richer, riper, and more like interesting because we moved through the Pluto return of the United States chart in 2022. What that means is if we create a chart that reflects the United States of America, it's July 4th, 1776. Some people will cast it for 5 p.m. because that's thought when more people were signing. Some people cast it for noon, but that's the day the idea of America was generated and like created.
So we can call it in terms of a human beingness when it took its first breath.
It's a birth rate. Exactly. It took its first breath. Some people do that with the Constitution's writing. And it's not the right moment to me. It's the Declaration because it was a birthing. It was a birthing moment. And that moment is what led to the Revolutionary War and the United States of America forming, started with the Declaration of Independence. So yes, exactly. It's the birth chart. In that birth chart, the planet Pluto was at 27 degrees of Capricorn. Now that doesn't mean anything significant in terms of understanding the United States of America, although I suppose we could look at the chart and make some interpretations about it. But for your audience, what's important about that is that in 2022, Pluto was back at 27 degrees of Capricorn. That's called a Pluto return. Now, some of your audience will know enough about astrology to know about what's called the Saturn return because it's the biggest return. Everybody in your audience will know about the solar return because it's your birthday. So when the sun comes back to the position it was when you were born, it's called a solar return. The sun is returned. And so the sun represents our sense of self. So the consciousness of the planet increases at the return. This is a birthday. The consciousness of self increases at the return. Please tell me happy birthday. By the way, I'm turning 60 on August 23rd, so you can send me a happy birthday wish.
Happy birthday, and I am turning
very excited to be turning 60.
A sprightly young 53 on August 25th.
Oh, that's right. You're an August birthday yourself. Well, happy birthday to both of us.
But there's no way I would have pegged you for 60, though, Michael.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. It's because I have all my hair. So the Saturn return is when the planet that represents life lessons and teaching and how we need to collect wisdom in order to survive a life in a body. At 29 and at 59, the Saturn return is a really difficult moment in a person's life where they come face to face with whatever lessons they have to learn in order to like pass the threshold that the teacher says you're ready to move to the next chapter. So I'm using those examples to get your audience, tuned to what a return is, because none of us will have a Pluto return. None of us are living to 300 years old, right? But the country had it, and it's a consciousness of the planet itself expands and accelerates during the return. The consciousness of Pluto is what's in the basement, what is hidden, what is the shadow, what is down below the surface, unavailable to be seen, but might be running the show, the shadow. And of course, the shadow of the United States of America is right there in the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal, which is the biggest lie there could be about America. No, not all men are created equal. Not unless you're, white and wealthy and Christian. And that year was the year we saw everything in the underbelly for what it really was, without equivocation, without hesitation. The violent racism just became like, nobody's hiding this anymore. I can't, I'm very hip to what's happening in current events at the moment, but I don't have a memory for them. I don't remember what was going on last year energetically, but I do know that it was the beginning of all of what we're seeing in a kind of reckoning way with Trump, and the insurrection now began in 2022.
Black Lives Matter.
All of it. Your audience will know the current events of the last 2 years better than I. All of what happened in the United States was, we pulled up the covers and saw, the poopy smell.
Like Hannah Bear pulling out the curtains behind me right now.
That's right. So the fact that so much has been revealed about the shadow of America is partly why things are happening now with Donald Trump literally announcing to the world, when I get elected, I'm going to turn this into a fascist state by destroying the governmental departments and making them all beholden to me, one person. I don't think that would have been uttered by Trump in 2023 had we not moved through 2022's Pluto return to just uncover all of that underbelly stuff that, what's that phrase they use now is they said the quiet part out loud. Well, guess what? I don't think in a year we're not going to be able to use that phrase anymore. There's no such thing as the quiet part. So I think we're seeing quiet parts spoken out loud now because of everything that got revealed during the Pluto return last year.
Wow. What else can I say?
Listen, you can't heal a wound unless the wound is triggered. So this is, where it becomes important to have hope, have love, to know what we're up to, but also recognize that we've got a wound to heal, and the wound is triggered in order for it to be healed. And that's what's so painful.
Having lived for years on Maui, it sounds like Pele. You're going to have that energy of chaos and destruction to bring about new earth.
Yeah, exactly right. It doesn't happen without that. I mean, even just surgery. You have a surgery, it saves your life. What's the first thing the surgeon does? He injures you. Cut you open. Make a big cut with a big knife. It's really sharp. Scary. But
seeing as I had hernia surgery in the last year, I'm going, All right. We're going to dive back into more big picture in just a little bit, but let's go a little bit more linear timeline. Other things before we get to this fall's solar eclipse, and I'm imagining things like blue moon and supermoons. That's more just of astronomy terms rather than astrological terms.
Well, yeah, they are. I mean, we have a blue moon in. This is where I'm going to be disappointing to your audience. You'll have astrologers who will come in and be like, "There's a blue moon in August," and it's like, you know what? It's just not a big deal. But we do have one. We got a full moon in Aquarius at the beginning of August, and then a full moon in Pisces at the end of August. But in some ways, we are out of the squeeziest part of the year, because the squeeziest part, the most difficult month, was July.
Well, I'm going to give a woohoo.
Yeah, woohoo on that. So we move through August. Yes, we have 2 full moons in the calendar year of August. But Michael, let me ask you a question. Can you imagine that 2 full moons in a calendar month? Does that strike you as wildly powerful?
No, considering we made the calendar, whoever
and
we is.
And we made a shitty calendar.
This is true.
We made a shitty calendar that doesn't even know what it's doing. We got to stick in a leap year every 4 years. And it's only 400 years old. We've been looking at the stars for 4,000 years, right? So it's like, okay, yes, there's 2 full moons in the same month. You know what's interesting to me? 2 full moons in the same sign. But they don't call it a blue moon because it's not the calendar. Because ancient astrologers in the court of various kings who had, invented that calendar were like, anyway, it's just not. And new moons, the super moons. I'm sorry, kids, that's not an astrological thing. Yes, the moon apogees and perigees. Yes, it sometimes does that when it's full. Yes, it's a little brighter by a tiny amount of lumens brighter. But I'm telling all of you kids, there's no difference between a full moon and a supermoon. It's just a full moon.
I don't even think growing up anybody mentioned supermoon. The only time they may have talked about it was
because we didn't know about it. It was something that got measurable when we had the technology and we were looking at lumens and, because it's not astrological. Now, could I be wrong about this? Could the fact that there is such a thing of supermoon be only discoverable in the last, say, 40, 50 years because we're measuring lumens in a way that we weren't? Yeah, I could be wrong about that. But I trust this little thing here, This thing here is a barometer for energy. I am so physically sensitive. It's like an amusement park ride. I've gone through periods in my life where I felt motion sick just being in my body because I feel energy. This is one of the reasons why I became an astrologer. Not I thought about, I got to figure out how to manage this body. It was that as I discovered astrology, I recognized that there were all sorts of sensations I felt that were marked by astrology, where I used to call myself, I would say I get sick all the time. It's like, I don't get sick all the time, but I'll tell you, at a full moon, I sometimes feel sick. Not sick with illness, but I called it moon sick. Anyway, the blah, 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 blah. Let me just make this little point. I have never felt a supermoon as different than a full moon. It's just this little body has never felt that. So I can't speak into it as if it's a.
Got it. But let's go through to the solar eclipse. But I'll make one little observation that you'll appreciate, which is particularly when I was living in Colorado, I was like sunrise and sunset photography everywhere, and I had gallery showings and blah blah blah, and I just loved doing that. And then I would take pictures of the full moon. And Michael, if I took pictures of the full moon for too long, I'd feel sick, or I'd say I would go moon crazy. I would have to stop because of the energy I would feel.
Yep. Well, I believe every word of that. So let's move it on. September is also kind of a medium month. August and September, not big, huge months. Venus will go direct in September, early September, September 3rd. So we're done with her retrograde when we get into September. And then we wrap things up between like then and early October with regard to Venus stuff. So one thing that we can say about September is there's a wrap up of emotional, relational, and financial material that might have come up earlier in the summer. Mercury is retrograde from like late, when does this happen? August 23rd.
Mm-hmm. Hello. Wait a second.
Yeah, my birthday. Everyone's going to be late for my birthday party. August 23rd to September 15th. So we have first half of September with Mercury actually retrograde, and then we get out of that. And then the shadow of Mercury's cycle goes through the end of September. Now we get into the big time with October, because it's about the eclipses, and that's what makes October and November sort of big and intense is the eclipses.
That's the sound effects. We have a Foley artist.
All about it. Yeah, and then we end the year. So October, November, very intense, mostly from eclipse season, and then we end the year with a Mercury, our last Mercury retrograde, and a pretty sort of easy month compared to the rest of the year.
Thank you. Are there things then, because people will be watching this the first week of August, first off, we're going to we could be a little tired and need to recover. But are there things that we get to do? Because let's play the 2-2-2 game. All right, we're feeling these energies. Sort of like I'm feeling the energy of the moon while taking pictures of it. Stop looking at the moon. Are there things that we get to do as we're coming toward October and November, and as we're going through this, oh my gosh, preparation year, as you're describing it?
I'm not sure I know how to answer the question. I mean, through the lens of astrology, I don't have an answer for you.
How about from the lens of Dr. Michael Lennox?
I think it's the sort of standard answer. It's like, know yourself, look in the mirror, take radical responsibility for everything that comes up when there's been a breakdown. Practice radical forgiveness so that you orient yourself to know that every time you're triggered in resentment and anger, that there's the intention to move into forgiveness. If you've got a spirit, listen, nobody's going to get through the next 5 years without a spiritual practice. So I would amplify your daily devotion. I think that if there were two things that I espouse for myself that if I could wave a magic wand and have sort of everybody do, I would have everybody learn how to stop the thoughts they're having and replace them so that they have a disciplined mind. It's the only thing we can change. You cannot change the first thought, but you can absolutely declare yourself done with it and not perseverate on it forever and ever and ever. And that is, I am here to report. I spent my 20s and 30s in a mind that was never not thinking and always angry. And I live in a mind that is free and I'm in control of it. And so since we create so much awfulness and stress with how we're thinking and perceiving, if people aren't working on, brushing their teeth and talking to somebody who's not in the room and stopping that and saying, I'm not interested in that resentful, angry conversation anymore, I'm turning my attention towards love and well-being. You do that 17,500 times a day for 10 years and you'll have a clear mind. And the other thing is breath. Anything that gets you in touch with your breath, which then does mean physical work with the body, is the best way to get the breath activated. That is the only thing that I know how to sort of respond to. How do we prepare for what's coming? Have a practice, know yourself well, do your shadow work, and get ready to bring your best to the world so that the world is served by what you have to offer.
Thank you. Another tangential question based on that. And this is asking the carpenter if we should grab a hammer. What about dream work during this time?
Dream work is all, it was my first love.
That's why I'm saying carpenter and the hammer.
Neptune, this is actually interesting in terms of this question. When we've talked so much about what's happening in 25 when Neptune moves into Aries, we want to be as prepared as possible, right? To be, in a loving posture, to be able or willing to figure out how to have conversations with difficult, disagreements, on the table, which I have no skill at whatsoever. But for the time being, we've got the planet that rules our spiritual connection, the unconscious, and dreaming itself is Neptune, in the sign that invented dreaming itself, Pisces. So we are, in fact, very connected, and have been since 2011, with our higher selves through our sleep and dream experience. And so we'll continue to be in territory where that work can be deep and rich and powerful because the planet that guides it is in the territory to make it so. And, because I'm a dream interpreter and an expert at dreams, I've written 4 books on the subject. I've been doing work in dream interpretation and workshops and teaching for years. And I will tell you that when Neptune moved into Pisces in 2011, it was remarkable to me how even just this, the questions that people would ask me at workshops after Neptune moved into Pisces was a game changer compared to before. The attendance at dream events doubled. The end of Neptune in Aquarius, which is where he was before Pisces, I couldn't get arrested to have a dream workshop. But man, right. So we've got another couple of years where we have great access to our higher consciousness through dream work. And the more we do that, the better prepared we will be to be active in the world with love in our hearts, following Neptune and Aries from a place of we're going to bring love to this mess.
Thank you. And we may have to have you back on dreams at some future date. Couple questions for Jessica and myself, then a couple last collective, and I need to know where people can go in your classes, and I know you've got all sorts of good stuff coming up. For Jessica and myself, we've been told we wouldn't be able to be fully settled until 1.5 to 2 years from now, and this is hitting square on with that 2025. Is there anything you're seeing in our charts about our future? And if not, that's totally okay as well.
Let's do this. I'm going to dial up looking at the year 2025. Um, while I'm doing that, can you define for me what you mean by settled?
Yeah. We have not found or been guided to our permanent home or location.
So you don't even have a sort of a draw of aha here.
Wow, the camera, as you said that, the light just attacked. This is perfect. The light just attacked the camera, Michael, as we talk about stability. My guess is it's back to Colorado. We're in Florida right now. In fact, when you were talking about moons and supermoons, I'm going, well, the only place it may have an effect is if a hurricane landed during the biggest of big full moons. That might have a little bit more pull or oomph on the tide. But my guess is we're going back to Colorado, although there's this part that says maybe we're not finding that stability because it's someplace completely foreign, so to speak, to where we lived so far, and that's why you're not finding it yet.
I'm looking at your astrocartography, and for you, I wouldn't necessarily pick Colorado as a place. Have you lived there? Is that why?
I lived there for over, bounce back and forth, over 20, with bounces, at least 25 years. But we can look anywhere in the world.
Hannah likes Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah, her moon line goes over Colorado. So Hannah has a kind of an at-homeness in that state. You have no lines going over Colorado.
Oh, that's interesting.
Jessica has a little bit of her Jupiter line goes over Colorado. So what does this mean? Moon line for Hannah going over all of Colorado means she will feel a kind of at oneness there. You don't have any lines going over Colorado, which means I would call it a place of neutrality for you. And for Jessica, she has portion of her Jupiter line going over portions of Colorado. She's in a better place to feel thriving than you.
Is there a place you see that it would put us together?
Would the Southwest ever appeal to you guys?
I think with the heat, and that's where we get to go next, Mama Earth and what's going on and what that has to do with the stars.
Oh, golly.
Let's go there.
You've got that to think about. Hot places are getting hotter. Yeah. Your Neptune and your moon consciousness goes over the lower part of the United States. So your experience goes well in Arizona, New Mexico, and so does Jessica's. In terms of like being settled, feeling settled, like when I look at the big transits of like the next few years, you're not settled next year. That's for freaking sure. Pluto is parking at the bottom of your chart, which is the home hearth place. That's like the ground is moving beneath your feet. So change about home consciousness for you next year it's about that it's changing. Jessica moves through her Uranus opposed Uranus next year. That's one of the midlife crises of astrology, where sudden things can happen and shifts can be out of nowhere. This is where unconscious men buy red sports cars. So that's
conscious ones by yellow Teslas.
Well, I think that by saying that,
I get what you mean.
The point I want to make is that Jessica's energy chart-wise for 2024 does not reflect landing or stable. So I would say just based on that, second part of 2025 might be where you land a little bit. Uranus is going to touch the top and the bottom of your chart. That's work and home at the same time. That might indicate a time of having some tether to both work and home. And you have been able to have your tether to work very powerful while home doesn't exist as a solid thing. So, and then if I look at 2025 for Jessica, the first kind of stabilizing Pluto transit is hitting her, Pluto trining her Jupiter, which means change is sort of reflecting positive, expansive Jupiterian possibilities. So if I were to make my best guess using the lens of transits astrology, I would say it's possible in 25, unlikely next year.
Thank you. So now I'm going to bring a global question and local, Jessica and myself. Is there anything we can see in the astrological signs? You talked about it earlier about the Earth being in danger. Anything you can see in the astrological signs about the Earth? And Jessica has been saying, soon is the time to have another child if we're going to have another child. But do we even bring a child into the world with the energy and what's going on the Earth?
You know, I'm sure you can find an astrologer who would speak into the Earth and global warming and astrology. In my world, that doesn't even exist. I'm not going to answer the question. It doesn't, like, it's like, what? Like, why would you even, yeah. But I want to be clear. I think there are astrologers who could or would. And I couldn't even do that if it's like, you can ask me the question, be like, what planet would you have me look at?
Fair enough.
To measure it. I would say I would go back to something like Pluto squaring the nodes of the moon this year would reflect becoming aware of stuff that was below the surface and frightening and hidden that impacts the direction that we're going to go in.
So from a climatological point of view, that's the heating up of the water that didn't show in a La Nina because the surface water appeared cool. And now we're getting to an El Nino where the heat is coming up.
So my posit on this is that the astrology reflects what we know, not what's happening in the water or the climate. So there are no transits to measure climate, but there are transits to measure or reflect consciousness and conscious awareness. So I can't use astrology to describe what's going to happen to the planet herself, but I could use it to describe how we might wake up to being more aware and available for making shifts and changes. And I think that all of the outer planets changing signs between this year, next year, and 25 with all of Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. And you can throw Saturn in there as well because he just moved into Pisces. And when we get to 25, he'll move into Aries. That alone tells me that in the next 3 years, we're in a completely different landscape on the planet because the outer planets changing signs change our consciousness. That can be an absolutely hopeful declaration because we need change. And so let the planets change signs and let us reflect those changes and have Uranus and Gemini have more people speaking up about what needs to be changed. Have Neptune and Aries have people on fire to make that change happen, driven by love. You know, to have Pluto and Aquarius saying we've got to create this age of Aquarius where everyone is cared for. So I think there's great hope possible when we think about all of the outer planets changing signs. But what has to change is our consciousness about how to deal with the planet.
Thank you. And bringing it to the babies, anything to say or baby, it sounds like, well, go for it when you're going to go for it. It's just an interesting time.
Oh, golly, yeah. Like I certainly would never use astrology to answer the question, should you or shouldn't you have a child? What a fascinating conversation to have when you think about, look, you guys have one, you created a family. It's going to be hard enough for her on Earth in, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Do you want to bring another one in? And it's like, I would go where the joy is. If the joy says have another child, have another child.
Thank you. All right. Couple last things here, and I need to share your daily Astro Alert, your classes, all of that. Is there anything you're doing differently during this time or that we should be thinking about during this time?
I would say this is going to sound just like my other answer to the question of like, just, clean your thoughts and get a practice. The thing that I'm doing differently is I'm ritualizing things much more in regard to my daily practice. Like back there, you can't really see it, but that's a Venus retrograde altar.
Oh, cool.
No, there. Well, there. I can't. There.
So what's on the altar?
It's a cloth with a candle and lots of objects that are usually on other altars that reflect love and my past and shadow stuff. And when Venus went retrograde, I lit the candle, I let it burn halfway down. And when Venus turns direct in 6 weeks, I'll light the candle and burn it all the way down. So why I did that was because it felt important to connect to something that was happening in a ritualized sort of declaration that I'm up for whatever this brings. But what's different, Michael, is Venus went retrograde a year and a half ago. I didn't do an altar. Venus went retrograde in 2015. I fell in love while it was happening. I didn't do an altar or a process, right? So my way of responding to the chaotic world is to shore up how I live inside my body so that it is in the best place physically, psychically, emotionally, and spiritually, so that when the shit does hit the fan, I'm ready to do my part, to be of service in the way I know to serve, and I will be there with all the hope and resilience that is natural to me.
Woohoo! And I can hear Hanaver laughing and giggling and full of joy in the background. So thank you, Michael. Where can people go to find out more? Wow, she got excited after that.
She did.
Wow.
MichaelLennox.com is the website, and everything that I'm doing can be found there. MichaelLennox.com. I'm actually really excited. First and foremost, I am teaching a class right now, a process shadow class called Going Deeper. It's a 4-week class. It meets on Saturdays. There's tons of homework. And we use myths and fairy tales in this series to do specific shadow dives. And this one's a juicy class. It's about Little Red Riding Hood and the rape of Medusa.
What?
Little Red lets us, yeah, baby. Little Red Riding Hood lets us look at issues of what there was like in the family of origin, relationship to parents and family. The whole idea of Little Red on her little trek into the woods gets us to look like, how did you learn how to tether away from the family and come back? Sexuality gets sort of burgeoned in the Little Red story. Sometimes grandma turns into a wolf. That's a perfect template to look at caretakers who are also awful at times, causing wounds. Medusa, we turn the Medusa myth and we look at it mostly from her perspective, where in the promise of life, the beautiful maiden is raped by Poseidon in Athena's temple, and Athena punishes her for it and turns her into a Gorgon. My God! Is that rich for looking at the promise of early life that gets cut down by disappointment, the idea of being in the patriarchy and having, this is more for women are drawn to this class than men, but men take it too, but the male gaze and what it's like to be out in the world in that regard. And we look at Perseus, who kills her with a mirror and everything like this. It's a juicy, juicy class. And I'm keeping registration open a little bit longer than I normally do, so that if people who watch this video want to join, it's a week later because it started last Saturday. But my classes are available live on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. Pacific, but also through recording. And I would say half the people who take my classes use the recordings. So at MichaelLennox.com under classes, Going Deeper, I'm keeping registration open for another couple of days. If anybody wants to join, they are welcome to. But the most exciting thing in my teaching world is astrology. I am opening my astrology school. So I've been asked for years and years and years and years and years, do I teach? And I've had a class called Astrology 101 where you learn to read your natal chart years ago, but it was connected to a platform that doesn't exist anymore. And so because that class that I taught years ago doesn't really exist anymore, I thought, well, I can't put up an astrology school unless I'm also servicing the people who don't know astrology. So starting in a couple of weeks, it's like 8 modules from the very basics to how to put together your chart. These are classes that are going to be there forever. They're not time delimited. You can take them live with me as I do them, but then they become a permanent part of the school. And then all next year and the year after, I'm going to be doing astrology class after class after class after class, teaching transits and advanced astrology. People have been wanting me to do this formally for a long time, and I'm finally starting. And we actually announced Astrology 101 at the top of this week. So there's information about that at michaellennox.com as well.
And you are, dare I say, giddy when you start talking about it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm excited. Listen, I love astrology. I love teaching astrology. And I've been wanting to do this for years, but what happened in the pandemic was I got so excited about the process classes I was teaching that's what I focused on in 20 and 21 and most of 22. So I'm ready now to turn my sights towards building an astrology school. So I am excited.
Woohoo! I love it. And this, Hannah taught me this. It's a happy clap. Hannah, do you want to say goodbye to Michael as we ask the last question here? Yeah? Here we go. Any last words you want to share? Any last wisdom or anything to do with what's coming up, Michael?
The last piece of wisdom I want to say is, kids, we got this. We are resilient beyond reckoning. We are here to live and thrive. We will continue to do that even with the chaos on the planet. We got a lot of mighty work to do, but I believe in the possibility of an age of Aquarius where all people on Earth are cared for and peace for humanity will be here at last. We got 2,000 years to get it right, kids. And you got to plant trees you don't expect to sit under the shade of. Do the work to help the planet now, even though we live in a chaotic time that will not right itself in the next decade or two. But we've got mighty work to do. Let's all do it. We do it together. We do it with love. And we do it supporting each other. And we got it.
Woohoo! Woo! That was a good way to put it as a positive. I like it, Michael.
Yay.
I cannot thank you enough. This has been beautiful. This has been wonderful. And I've watched this giant storm come in and kind of rolled past as we were speaking here. So there was thunder, there was lightning, there was excitement, there was giddiness, there was laughter. So thank you so much for everyone out there. This is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun. Check out all that Dr. Michael Lennox has to offer. Check out your dreams, check out the stars, and above and beyond all else, shine bright. Woohoo! We just had the most amazing turn the world upside down interview with Dr. Michael Lennox. And, wow, Hannah Bear, you want to stay upside down? Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? I think we should get you right side up. I think we should get you right side up for the ending of the show. If you want to find out more, we've got the School of Mystics. You can find the link for that down below. If you want a daily attunement, simply go to dailywoohoo.com is the best place to go there. Of course, you can check out everything by Dr. Michael Lennox as well. Here's a link to the next amazing show. Love you guys so much and keep on shining bright. Woohoo! How does it get any better than this? Here's that link.